All right, welcome back to the Krueg Show podcast. Larry Krueger with you. And our guest today is Grant Napear, longtime voice of the Sacramento Kings, now doing his own thing with his own podcast, which he puts out there a couple times a week. What's going on, Grant? How are you?
I love that intro, man. That's a kick-ass intro. I like that a lot, man. That's really good, So we're going to start off talking a little NBA and a lot of Warriors basketball, but I like that. That looks sharp, man. I like that.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So tell people about if they want to hear your podcast, where they can get it, and what kinds of things you talk about on the podcast. I would imagine it's a lot of hoop.
Yeah, it's a lot of hoop, but it's a lot of guests, just like you have on your YouTube channel here. I put my podcast out every Tuesday and every Friday, and then I have a show that I do on an app called Listen App, Monday through Friday at 3:00 Pacific. It's just like we're doing here, but the difference is I have a lot of people call in, so it's almost like a radio show on an app. It's called Listen App, and then I do a show with Sean Salisbury, usually every Tuesday and Thursday on No Filter Network. It's a network that Eric Burns started. It's been very interesting to work with Sean Salisbury on that. Again, that's nofilter.net. But my podcast is available on all of the podcast platforms out there. And I also have a website. If you don't like that.com is my website. All my content is on there. But, I've had a lot of guests. Larry, I've been blessed just like you. You've over the years have met so many phenomenal people in this business. I mean, Charles Barkley was the first guest that I had on my podcast. And I just thought that was a great way to get going. And Dusty's been on my podcast, Dusty Baker. I've had Mike Breen, Ian Eagle, Kevin Harlan, all the top announcers. I've had a lot of different subjects on my podcast. It's mostly sports, Larry. But with what's going on in our world today, I do branch off sometimes and talk about some other issues as well. So I've really enjoyed it. Again, like you and I talked about last week, it wasn't something that I really had planned on doing. But,
Right.
you got to pick yourself up and move forward.
Absolutely. Well, what did you think of the opening weekend of the NBA playoffs? Before we, without me leading you in any direction, what stood out to you?
Well, before we get to the Warriors, I was really impressed with what Minnesota did going into Memphis. I thought Memphis would prevail in this series, and they still might. But I thought that was a really big game for that franchise, coming off the high of beating the Clippers, and everyone was getting on them for their celebration. Hey, listen, the Timberwolves have been awful for a long time. I'm okay with them getting excited. I'm okay with their fans getting wrapped up. I thought Patrick Beverley went overboard, but he always goes overboard. But I like the excitement. I like the passion. But I got to tell you, I thought Minnesota going into Memphis and winning game one really showed me something. And then we get to the Boston series yesterday. And, Kyrie Irving, it's always something with Kyrie. It's always something. Yeah. And, if you look back at his tenure in Boston, he brought basically all of this on by himself. If you look at last year before the game, going out and stomping on the Celtics logo at midcourt and everything else, you're going to get that type of reaction. Now, listen, Larry, I don't condone fans throwing stuff. I don't condone racist comments. I think we're all on the same page there. But Kyrie just lets everything get to him. And he was very good yesterday, Larry, except for, how do you explain that defensive sequence by the Nets on the Tatum layup with that time? Durant looked lost. Irving looked lost. Maybe they ought to, maybe Kyrie says the most outlandish, ridiculous things. So I don't really know, Larry, when Kyrie is really being serious and when he's not, how I can take him seriously. That series is going to be really, really good. But that Minnesota, I got to tell you, that Minnesota series started off differently than I thought it would. I thought Memphis would get the early jump. And again, I was really impressed with what I saw from Edwards and the Timberwolves.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the T-Wolves for a second, because Anthony Edwards looks like the best young player in the league. At least he did this weekend. I mean, he was absolutely incredible. 36 points in his postseason debut. Then you mix in Karl Anthony Towns and, what he is as a player. He's just really dominant. Their two-man game, the long-term future for the T-Wolves with those two guys is really, I don't know if it's going to be this year, but man, long-term, they're looking great. And Edwards is just, I'm not saying he's Jordan, but he's got some of the elements to Jordan in that he can go by you at will. He can rise over you. He's physically dominant. He's long. He's just, to me, this weekend was a lot about the Anthony Edwards coming out party.
They hit a home run in the draft, similarly to the year before when Memphis hit the home run with John Morant. All right, and they got lucky and they moved up in the draft. And that particularly, change their franchise. Jackson was a good pick the year before, but when you get a special player and you look at what Edwards did, as you said, in this playoff game, but you look at his maturation process very early in his career, the foregone conclusion in Minnesota, Larry, was, well, Towns is going to be gone. They're not going to be able to keep him. Now they're really building something. You got new ownership. You saw how vibrant, in that playoff game, the play-in game against the Clippers. And we haven't seen an atmosphere like that in Minnesota since Kevin Garnett was there. So it has been a long time. They got something building there. We talk about the West. You look at where Phoenix, 3 years ago, Phoenix was not relevant in the West. They were a lottery team. They weren't a playoff team. Now here they are with the number 1 seed. Minnesota was not relevant 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Look at where they are. You look at Denver and how they've ascended, and they now have a Jokic. And barring injury, Denver's going to be very good for a long time as long as they have Jokic, because he's that good. Now, I thought the Warriors, Larry, as we jump to them, I thought defensively they did a phenomenal job. And, of course, we're talking about Draymond Green. Look at the difference in game 1 on Saturday when Draymond Green is on the floor and when he's not on the floor, and how he impacts the game defensively. A lot of people want to talk about Poole, rightfully so, and the guards, and rightfully so. But I look at the defense of Draymond Green. You look at Jokic, he was not efficient. What did he take, 25 shots to get his points? He wasn't efficient. They did a tremendous job on him. And without Murray, who's been hurt all year, without Porter, I think when you look at Denver, Larry, if Jokic doesn't go off and if he's not that MVP Jokic, they don't really have a chance. Now, I thought Denver would win this series before it started. I really did. All right. And the series is not over. But if Jokic is going to be handcuffed like he was in game 1, the Nuggets won't win this series. He's going to have to figure out a way. And I think it's more up to his teammates to do better. They didn't shoot the ball well from beyond 3. Of course, we know with the Warriors, that's their bread and butter, but they also find ways to beat you. And again, I thought defensively, when Draymond was on the floor, that was the difference in the game.
Yeah. To me, the difference was the fact that Draymond is in the right mental space.
Yes.
There are times where he vaults over the line. He's a ferocious competitor and he sets the tone, but sometimes his tone is just over too, he's dialed up too much. And in those situations, I think he gets in trouble with officials. He gets baited by opponents. He starts throwing the ball away, forcing turnovers. To me, he was in that perfect zone of looking to make that extra pass, looking to play high percentage, smart basketball, especially in the half court. But he also kept it reined in. And if he keeps it reined in and focused, man, he's a winning player. I mean, he elevates them. And then Golden State, believe it or not, Grant, has some scoring issues. And without Curry, Poole stepped up, and if Poole's going to roll like that, and you're going to get late regular season Jordan Poole, then the offensive, weight on Steph's shoulders is lifted, and he can just kind of get healthy and blend. So I thought game 1 could not have gone better for Golden State. And to me, Denver looked gassed. They look
tired,
completely out of gas.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I want to get back to Draymond for a moment. You're 100% correct. But there's always the unknown with Draymond, because you always know there's a what's next, but you don't know when that what's next is going to happen. I mean, we saw it years ago. Listen, I think we all can acknowledge if Draymond does not get suspended for game 5, there's no way Cleveland goes into Oakland and wins that game and subsequently wins the series. We don't know about Draymond. We don't know. I mean, Larry, tonight, all right, when you're doing your post game after this game 2, you could be talking about a whole different Draymond. Gee, he let the refs get to him. He got an early technical. It got taken out of the game. That's the unknown with Draymond. When he's right, like he was on Saturday, he really is as valuable as anybody on that team. There's no question about that. So you hit that right on the head with Draymond Green. And if that's the Draymond that you're going to get, then yes, the Warriors are going to be fine. Now, can I expect Poole to do tonight what he did in game 1? Probably not. But I think as this series goes on, Larry, you're going to see a better and better and better Steph Curry, assuming he doesn't have a setback with the ankle. And then Clay, I mean, listen, playoff Clay, right, with everything else they have going on. But Michael Malone's been around the block a couple of times, Larry. His adjustments tonight in game 2 are going to be very interesting. But I'm with you. The Nuggets look gassed to me. They look tired. They have a lot of attrition. They played shorthanded, Larry, a lot this year. And I just wonder, is this a team that maybe the Warriors are catching at the perfect time? Tonight's a huge game, obviously. I don't think, Larry, barring injury, that the Nuggets will be able to beat the Warriors 4 out of 5 times. And again, I know that the series doesn't start, as they say, until the team loses on their home floor. But if the Warriors don't suffer any injuries, I don't see Denver winning 4 of 5 games if Denver doesn't even up the series tonight.
I mean, their secondary scorer is Will Barton.
Yeah,
that's just probably not enough. They don't really have the horses. If Golden State plays the kind of transition defense they did in game one, if they play that
right.
the rest of the series,
Yep.
and then, I mean, they played 4 times in the regular season. Denver had a +7 advantage on average on the glass in those 4 games. Denver has to out rebound the Warriors. They got to get out and get easy buckets, and neither happened in game one. That to me, that is the Nuggets' beginning to victory. They have to, we know they're challenged offensively without Murray. They don't have a secondary scorer, but if they can get out in transition and get easy buckets, that's going to help. And they have to dominate on the glass. The Warriors beat them on the glass, limited their fast break points, and when you do that, man, it puts an awful lot of pressure on Jokic to do it all. And I just don't think I agree with you about Malone, but I don't know what adjustment.
What is he going to do? I don't know. Poole played very well in the regular season against Denver. The Warriors, to me, their personnel, Larry, I guess that's the way we look at it. Their personnel is better than Denver's. I mean, it just is. I mean, if you put their roster on the paper and Denver's without Jamal Murray, without Porter Jr., their roster, the Warriors roster, is better. And again, I think another key is Curry should get better and better as these games go on. And when you look at what Poole did, and again, I don't expect him to score 30 plus every game, but if Curry does become more and more like Steph Curry, then as you said, what does Michael Malone go to? He got Will Barton. I mean, who else is he going to go to match up with the Golden State backcourt when you have Curry and Poole and Thompson on the floor at the same time? And then you have, Draymond out there with Wiggins. I mean, what does Michael Malone do? Unless Jokic is Superman, and he has the ability to do that. But when Draymond Green's on the floor, he was able to neutralize him. I don't know what Michael Malone can do either. You're right. When I said he's been around the block a couple times, I think you'll get an A game by the Nuggets tonight. I really do. I believe, the Nuggets, I think in Michael Malone's tenure with Denver, they've lost game one of a series 3 times, and they've won all 3. So it's not like they're going to be rattled. They've been down before, but this is a different animal because, as you said, they look tired and they're shorthanded. So we'll see. But I think Curry, Larry, is going to get better as this series goes on. He should. I mean, aren't we all expecting Curry to get a few more minutes and score and be a little bit more of a factor with each passing game?
He should be for sure. How about Boston and Brooklyn as we jump to the East? Who did you like going into that series? Who do you like now?
Well, I think
shut this door.
What's that? Oh, no problem. As you go do that, I think Brooklyn is the entire wild card. I think Brooklyn's the wild card in the whole playoffs because they have Irving and they have Durant. And I'm not expecting Ben Simmons back. And I just, you have to leave him off. But when you have 2 of the very best players in the league on the floor together, I think Brooklyn was the wild card. I thought this series would go the distance before it started because I don't think there's a separation really between these 2 teams. And listen, Boston ended the season playing very well. They have a lot of momentum. But now think about this. Boston, in their home game 1, needed I don't want to call it a miracle, but I mean, Irving hits the 3, right? Then it's a 1-point game, final possession, and Boston gets a layup on a spin move after Smart finds them as the horn sounds. So if I'm Brooklyn, even though they lost that game, I can take some positives out of that, hey, we were right there. We may have given them the game. That was shoddy defense. I mean, Larry, have you watched that defensive sequence a couple of times? What the hell is Brooklyn doing? I mean, it almost looked like they had never been on the floor together. What the hell are they doing out there?
Oh, I know. I mean, the lack of communication was huge. I'll tell you the other thing I thought in that game, Grant, Al Horford. I mean, Al Horford had 20 and 15.
Yep.
I wasn't banking on Al Horford to have that kind of a performance.
No.
Is that an outlier or is that the way he's going to play? I mean, to me, that's a big question in this series. I looked at it as a very even series. Boston was the hottest team in the East second half of the year. Brooklyn kind of limping in, but with big time star power and a bunch of new faces, but no Ben Simmons. Kyrie had 39, flipped off the fans. KD
Yep.
had 23, but it was on 9 of 24. So it
Not
wasn't
good.
a very
No.
efficient KD.
No.
To me, if Boston can get, Jaylen Brown's going to do his thing. Smart scored in this game. Tatum had a pretty nice game. But if Al Horford is 20 and 15 and looking like the Al Horford from years back,
Yep.
yeah, and that's good. That's a factor I hadn't really, I hadn't really factored in Al Horford as a difference maker in this series. But if he's going to play
Right.
that way, that's going to help Boston.
Sure. I mean, look at all the playoff games Al Horford's been in. I mean, and one thing that Horford has, he's got that, playoff pedigree, which we saw on display game one. So interesting. And then the other series, we haven't talked about this yet, but all right. So you see Dallas without Luka. They lose at game one. Luka's probably not going to play tonight. And Larry, I'm using common sense here. I'm not a doctor. Calf strains linger. Okay. It's not like you have a calf strain and you come back and you generally are 100%. If anything, a calf strain can reappear and get worse. Again, I'm not a doctor here, but he's doubtful for tonight, unless in the last 20 minutes they've officially ruled him out. I don't expect him to play tonight. If the Jazz win tonight and go home up 2-0, then does Dallas almost have to play Luka in game 3, even if he's so-so? I mean, because in order for them to win this series, Larry, they're going to have to probably go on the road in Utah and win both games. That's an awfully tall order, even though the Jazz were Jekyll and Hyde this year. But this is a huge, absolutely huge game for the Mavericks tonight without Luka. And again, I'm assuming Luka's not going to play.
And it doesn't. What does that say for the Mavericks? I mean, Utah's coming apart at the seams. Gobert and Mitchell are headed for a divorce in the offseason. They don't get along. There's all kinds of bad hoodoo on that team. But Bogdanovich, he helped them. I mean, 26, that was big for Bogdanovich. And then Mitchell in the second half just took that thing over. I like Utah to get out of that series. The other one I think is interesting is, at the beginning of the series, I wasn't sure what to expect from Philly, Toronto in the East. But, man, Grant, Tyrese Maxey is playing – a lot of rookies hit that rookie wall. You would never know he's a rookie by the way he's playing. He uses so much energy, and I don't know if Harden's going to show up or shrink in the moment.
Right.
History tells us he's going to shrink. But you got an MVP and you got Maxey. And you've got, Harden not driving the bus, I guess, because he's kind of riding along with these guys. Maybe that's the perfect situation for James. Maybe Philly's getting by Toronto. I kind of had Toronto getting by Philly, but after watching game one, I don't know. Toronto looked pretty flat.
And then you look at the health report now of Toronto, it's not good. So, I was curious. I was going to bring this up last week, but I'll bring it up now. I think pressure is an overused word in sports, but I'm going to use it for just sake of you and I talking. Do you think that there's a coach that has more pressure on him due to past playoff failures with this roster and what Daryl Morey did with the big trade at the deadline than Doc Rivers? I mean, I know Doc won in Boston, but Larry, let's be honest, they should have won. Look at all the disappointments that he had in LA when he had the Chris Paul in his prime, Blake in his prime, DeAndre Jordan in his prime, never could make it out of the second round. Look at the failure already in Philadelphia leading into this season. Morey makes the big deal, has his guy Harden. Now he has an MVP, maybe an Embiid. What do you think would happen if Philadelphia lost in this first round to Doc? What do you think? You think he'd be back?
I think there's a very good chance he wouldn't be. But I don't know the relationship between Morey and Doc as far as as far as day to day, how well those guys communicate. But yeah, I mean, Doc's had some high profile failures in the playoffs. Morey's got the cast that he wants. Maybe Morey would cut him a little slack because it all kind of came together on the fly, and maybe he would have one more year. But he would then, if he comes back next year, he would enter next year with an X on his chest. I mean, he is the marked man going into next year if that happens. I'll tell you the other thing that jumped out to me in this, I thought Bucks Bulls, I like the Bucks to win that series and sweep them, But man, Giannis sure looked awesome in game one. And then Phoenix, New Orleans, I expect that to be a whitewash for all Phoenix. But man, Chris Paul
Yeah.
looks like he's primed to
Mm-hmm.
win the ring. This looks like, if you said what are my primary takeaway from weekend
Yep.
one, is that the Warriors and Suns may be on a crash
Yep.
course, and it may really come down to the Warriors standing in front of Paul trying to keep him from a title, because I think that might be the series to watch when it's all said and done. When we look back at
Yep.
the playoffs, I think Warriors Suns Western Conference Finals will be like the series, and the Warriors may get a Phoenix team that's loaded, that's bigger,
Yep.
that's athletic, that's well coached, and with a healthy Chris Paul,
And
who absolutely took over in crunch time yesterday.
not only healthy, but fresh. Okay.
Yeah,
Long season. The injury actually could work out well in
right.
hindsight because it didn't affect their seeding. They're still the best team, best record. And now you have Paul, let's face it, he's got a lot of attrition on him. He's not a pup anymore. He had enough time off. So he should be really good for this playoff run. So that does bode well. I'm still not going to say goodbye to the Memphis Grizzlies yet. I still think Memphis comes back and wins this series. And if they get momentum, and they do, I still think Memphis is going to be a tough out for whomever. But when you lose game one, Larry, on your home floor, the way Memphis did, the way Dallas did, different circumstances because Dallas is without their best player, it almost makes game two a must-win situation in a best-of-7 series. It really does.
It's interesting. Let's talk about Memphis for a second, because I thought their coach did an incredible job this year. I thought they were prepared in the regular season, maybe better than some of the teams they went up
Yep.
against. But what level do they have to get to? They were playing, and we see this sometimes in the NBA. Teams that squeeze every possible bit out of their team in the regular season don't have another level to get to in the playoffs. I thought that the way that Memphis played as a team this year, they expended a lot of energy, but they played a really smart brand of ball. Even when Ja wasn't out there,
Right.
man, they looked really good as a
Yes.
team. I just don't. First of all, I hate giving a talented team like the T-Wolves any kind of confidence. I think the
Right.
T-Wolves are going to be exponentially more difficult to beat after game one
Yep.
because of game one. So I like Minnesota to move on in this series, but I'm just kind of wondering what you think. Did Memphis, do they have another level to get to, or did they play such efficient basketball in the
Yep.
regular season that this is kind of their penalty?
I look at the overall body of work as opposed to 48 minutes. And generally, the overall body of work will come to the surface after a game that is a bad game. And it was a bad game for Memphis. I think they're a very good team. I think they're very well coached. Look at their record this year when Morant did not play. I mean, it was outstanding. I would be surprised, Larry, and I really mean this. Actually, I would be very surprised if Memphis does not win game two. Now, you got to understand, as an announcer for the Kings, I don't have a lot of knowledge when it comes to playoff basketball, okay? For 32 years. But I always remembered that I never thought that one game carried over to the next in the playoffs. It always seemed like there were so many, especially early in a series. What happened in a game one, game two, a lot of times would be entirely different. I think Memphis wins game two. And if they don't, again, I would be very surprised, Larry. I look at their whole body of work. I look at their personnel. I look at how they play. I'm going to have a lot of pressure on them. Yes, I think they win game two and make this a hell of a series. I think they're too good, Larry. Out of everything that happens in the playoffs this year, if you tell me that Memphis, before the playoffs started, we're going to lose 2 games at home and go into Minnesota down 0-2, that would be, to me, I would say, nah, not going to happen. Can't happen. And I still feel that way. I think Memphis will even up this series. I think they're too good, Larry.
Yeah, I hear you, because I saw them in the regular season, and I kind of agree. But there's an awful lot of Warrior fans, Grant, right now gloating, feeling really good about Denver and feeling really good about Minnesota beating Memphis in the first round.
No.
All saying that is be careful what you wish for, because Minnesota's enormously talented,
Yes, they
and
are.
Edwards is a superstar in the making, and we know Towns is. So two superstars, and they get some confidence from knocking off Memphis in the
Yep.
first round. I think whoever emerges from that series is going to give Golden State a full,
Yep. Yes.
6 or 7 game knockdown drag out battle.
The one thing I really do count on when you get to this time of the year, and I think the Warriors are number one on the list, is playoff experience. Generally speaking, assuming that the team is healthy, the Warriors will not beat themselves in big games in the spring. They've been there before. They know what it takes. They don't get rattled when they're trailing. They don't get rattled when things aren't going their way. Their championship pedigree and that experience, I think, does bode very well for them as these playoffs go on. And the fact that they were able to win game one with Curry coming off the bench. And we haven't even talked a lot about that. And I'm going to give you a similar experience. Sacramento in 2002 lost to the Lakers in game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. The year after that, the Kings lost in the second round to Dallas when Chris Webber went down with the knee injury and had microfracture surgery. The Kings made a trade to get Brad Miller from Indiana. And the following year, the Kings had the best record in the NBA on March 2nd, all right, without Webber. Webber didn't play a game. March 2nd, Larry, the Kings had the very best record of every team in the league. Chris comes back, and what happens? They start him. The Kings were 500 the rest of the way and lost in the second round. Aileen Boyson, who was a very well-respected and very well-known reporter for the Sacramento Bee, and her expertise was basketball, was spot on this. She thought that Rick made a big mistake by starting Chris instead of bringing him off the bench. But she also made the point that he probably didn't have a choice because there's no way with Chris's ego that he would ever allow that to happen. I think it's amazing that you have one of the very best players of his generation in Steph Curry. And he was fine and actually was like, let me come off the bench. That doesn't happen every day in professional sports. That to me is the makeup of Golden State and how damn special this team is. It's all for one and one for all. It's not about I've got to win the MVP. It's not like these guys walk into the locker room and grab the stat sheet and are pissed if they don't have the numbers. I love that about this team. Again, Larry, think about this. Steph Curry, playoff game, I'll come off the bench, no problem. That doesn't happen every day, Larry.
I thought it was a huge move as well and it was a huge move for 2 reasons. One, because I think Steph probably physically is not quite there, but 2, it's a more difficult thing to come off the bench than it is to just keep rolling the way Poole's rolling. And one of the things that Golden State had to have happen is they needed to see the Poole that we saw at the end of the year that was going for 25 a game without Steph Curry. That Poole needed to continue on into the playoffs. I think Golden State understood that, and I think Steph understood that. And so putting Poole in the lineup and letting Steph adapt. Steph's got more talent. He's got more game. And he can adapt. He can make that He can make that transition. I don't know that Poole could,
I understand.
Maybe he could, maybe he couldn't, but it was a question. So the fact that they got, full, they got the late season Jordan Poole. It was almost like a continuation of the regular season. That bodes well for Golden State, and they've had problems scoring. They're a defensive team that at times struggles to score. And if Poole can give them 30, man, to me, it's almost like every shot that he makes is almost like 2 because you got Steph, you got Clay, you've got this great surrounding cast. And you're not, sometimes he's hot, sometimes he's not. If Poole is hot and he can give them 25 or 30, they're going to be really tough.
Well,
they're going to be a tough out.
If he can give them 25 or 30, the series is over and the Warriors are going to be in the Western Conference Finals. I mean, I don't see that happening every game, but what I can see again is it's going to be a different guy every night with the Warriors right now. It's not going to be Poole every night. And again, it's going to be Curry. It's going to be Clay. It's going to be Wiggins. But again, I go back to egos and what we deal with in professional sports now in this day and age. And we look at so many other star athletes that would not be willing, would not be okay, would not be accepted of what what Steph did in game one. And again, I just think that's such a special makeup of this player with Steve Kerr on this team. I really admire that. Someone that was with the Kings for 32 years and look from afar lately, and how that team goes about their business when they were winning championships, and how they're coached, and how it's not me, and they're genuinely happy when somebody else is the hero on a given night. That makeup of that team in San Francisco is special. That doesn't mean they're going to win the championship this year, but everyone understands their role and, more importantly, accepts their role. And any good team will have that. There are a lot of teams in sports, Larry, and you know this, where you don't get players that accept their role because they think they should be doing more. Buddy Hield was like this in Sacramento. Buddy thought that he was Klay Thompson. Buddy thought he was an all-star. And Buddy has to realize what he is, make it suit him to perfection in the right scenario. And he had trouble with that because Buddy always thought he was better than he is. Buddy's a great shooter, but he's not a great basketball player. There's a difference. He's not a great defender. He's not a great ball handler. He's not even a good defender. He's not even a good ball handler. What he does, as well as almost anybody in the league, is shoot, but he thought that he was better than that. And no, I don't see that with the Warriors. I think everybody understands and accepts their role. And I think that's why they're so dangerous, Larry.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing is it's a loud statement from Steph and Kerr, whatever it takes.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Whatever it takes to get it done. I thought there was another little subtle move that Kerr made in game one. He did not play his rookies at all. Mm-hmm. He sat Kuminga. He sat Moody. Those guys have gotten meaningful minutes at different times this year. And I think they'll both, well, I don't know about Moody, but I know Kuminga is going to have a role in this series and have a role in these playoffs. But I like the game one sit and watch, because NBA regular season and NBA, it's like preseason, regular season, postseason. There's a dramatic step in intensity and accountability in each level of the ladder. And to me, to show the young guys that this is what you're going to see and this is what you have to adapt to, I thought was instead of just throwing them out there and giving them game 1 minutes, let them see the tempo of the whole thing. This is how we're going to win. This is how we're going to play. This is the efficiency that we demand, and you're going to have to play at this level. And I think you'll see Kuminga play very un-rookie-like in this series, because that example was set. That level is the expectation.
And when you can do that and your team wins, then that's the perfect situation, right? Had the Warriors lost game one, maybe you and others would be saying, gee, how come he didn't play? How come they didn't play? But you're right. I think it's great to watch while the team's winning. It's their first time, go through it. And I'm with you. I think that Kuminga will be asked in this series to contribute. So this game 2 tonight, okay, if Jokic is not efficient, if he's got to take 25 shots to score 25 points, Denver's not going to win this game, because they don't have the firepower to keep up with Golden State. They just don't. So that's going to be the number one key. How is Jokic going to be more efficient in this game tonight? That's the whole key to me.
Yeah, to me, it's like he can go off for a crazy double-double. Where they're going to lose is if he goes for a triple-double, right? Because then all of a sudden, now he's getting other people involved. If he gets other people involved, that's how Denver beats Golden State. Let me pay the bills here. With our sponsors. Telmetrics is one of our sponsors, telmetrics.co. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, or a physical therapist, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. So Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injuries and physical rehabilitation needs, if you're a rehabilitation specialist, make sure you go to telmetrics.co. And we appreciate them for being a sponsor of the Krueg Show. And our other sponsor is Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist. He's at securemoney.com. Give Danny a call, 925-628-9966. These are tough times, troubled times really around the globe, and you want to make sure your money is secure. And that's really the bottom line. He's got 25 years of experience. He's born and raised here in the Bay Area, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call today for an appointment, 925-628-9966. Make sure that you're putting your money where it is secure. Once again, Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist at securemoney.com. Once again, he's available right now at 925-628-9966. And we thank Danny for being not just a sponsor of the show, but an occasional guest on the show. He's a huge sports fan. All right, let's switch gears and talk some other NBA topics outside of the opening weekend. There is I don't even call it a rumor because I haven't really seen it in print. There is a rumbling that LeBron James would like to finish his career possibly playing for the Warriors. And this is like one of these things that really gets Warrior fans kind of riled up, because they've always viewed LeBron as the rival, and the last thing they want to do is welcome the rival and have him, add up rings in his pursuit of Jordan's titles, wearing a Warrior uniform along for the ride. So I would vote two hands down no on LeBron coming to the Warriors. What do you think of the idea? I guess the question is this: you're an NBA insider at this point, Grant. What do you think? I mean, he's in LA. They probably should have traded for Buddy Hield. Instead, LeBron said no. LeBron, the GM, said, I want Russell Westbrook. They now have an asset that is almost untradeable. They've got no roster flexibility. He's kind of run his course there. They did win a title in the bubble. What's the next and maybe final chapter of LeBron's Hall of Fame career? Is he going to stay in LA? Is he going back to Cleveland for a third stint? Is there any chance you could see him on the Warriors?
Well, first of all, what would the Warriors have to do to acquire him? That's number one. And number two, do they really need him? I know we're talking about arguably the greatest player of all time. In my book, he's second or third, but he's in the conversation. Do the Warriors need him? Now, we may have a different opinion if the Warriors end up losing this series to Denver. You might be more inclined to say, let's roll the dice while we have Steph still going and Clay and Draymond. We are dealing with a time frame here. Why don't we roll the dice, try to get LeBron, and see if we can win another title or two? I would be surprised. If I'm the Warriors right now, I would say no. I'm with you. I would give it thumbs down. I don't think it makes sense for Golden State. And then the question is, does it make sense for LeBron? I mean, how would that fit, Larry? When you look at the personnel of the Warriors, I know LeBron is great, but how does that fit with their personnel? I don't see it happening. I really don't. I would be very surprised if that happened. And I would say no, I don't think they need LeBron. As crazy as that sounds, I don't think they need him.
I don't think they do either. But that being said, what do you see for the twilight of his career? I mean, where does he finish? Does he stay in LA?
He has said that he would love to play with his son for his final year. I don't know where Ronnie. His son, and I don't know what kind of potential player he would be. That's a fabulous question. I don't see LA as a quick fix. And I know that in LA, when you're the Lakers, you always seem to be able to figure it out because players want to play there. Players will figure out a way to go there. But I'm looking at the Lakers roster right now, Larry. You talked about, Westbrook and how awful he was this year. And Anthony Davis, who gets hurt getting out of the shower in the morning. Do you see the Lakers being relevant next year? I mean, what would they have to do, Larry, to be an upper echelon team? And again, LeBron's starting to break down a little bit. I know he's LeBron, but I don't see it happening in LA right now. Do you?
No, it befuddles me why they tore it all down. They had some role players that worked, and then all of a sudden they shipped them all out. Caruso's gone. Caldwell Pope is gone. They had some decent role players around LeBron.
Yeah,
it takes time to accumulate role players that fit in your mix. Now they've kind of they don't have they really don't have any assets. I don't. You've got an old LeBron. You got a broken down Anthony Davis. You've got a roster that's It's kind of a mix mosh. I mean, they had 9 new players this year. I mean, I don't know why anybody thought this year was going to work. 9 new players. I mean, when has that ever worked in basketball? I mean, just that's an awful lot of turnover on a 12 to 15 man team. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know
You know
where
what?
he goes. But
I'll
I
tell you
don't
right
want
now,
him here.
I'll tell you, if you really want a challenge and you want to cap off your career in unbelievable fashion, go to a place where you are literally going to be the king of the biggest city in the world. Go play for the Knicks. All right. They're a mess. Okay. Now, understand where I'm coming from when I say this. Go to New York, do something for that franchise, which has been so bad for so long under James Dolan. If you believe in your talent the way LeBron does, go to New York, recruit another player to go with you, and do what the Nets just did. Even though it hasn't worked out, the Nets said Durant, Kyrie, and again, they may prove us wrong in the playoffs this year. Maybe they won't. But how amazing would it be, Larry, to have LeBron James at Madison Square Garden 41 times a night for a franchise that has been absolutely an embarrassment as of late, with the exception of last year, by the way, when they were 4th in the East and then lost to the Hawks in round 1. And then this year took a huge step back. Who the hell knows what happened this year? Now, could he play with Tibbs? I don't think he could. I think that would not be a good fit. I don't see that at all. But we're fantasizing here. You're asking me what
Sure.
could be the swan song for him. Could you imagine him playing for the Knicks at the Garden 41 times a year?
Well, it would give the Knicks a layer of relevancy that they haven't experienced in a long, long time, going back to the mid '90s, right?
Yep. Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would help the Knicks. It would help the league's bottom line, but it would take, he seems like he wants to go into a favored situation. He doesn't seem like he wants to elevate a team. He seems like he wants to join a team that's going to win and, get out front and call it a parade.
I don't like that. I mean, I wasn't a fan of Durant coming to the Warriors when he left Oklahoma City. I was critical of him. I'm still critical of him. And I recognize Kevin Durant as one of the very best players to ever walk on this planet. So it's not like I'm not a fan of his. It's not like I don't acknowledge him being a great player. I wasn't impressed with anything that he accomplished in Oakland with the Warriors. I just wasn't. It wasn't like I was like, they were really good. They were a championship team before he got there. And that, by the way, is still a degree of criticism that Durant faces even here in 2022 when people talk about his career. Now, when you look at LeBron's legacy and everything that he's accomplished, he probably doesn't care about that. But what would the narrative be if LeBron goes to the Warriors, Larry, and wins a championship or two? What would they say about LeBron? Would that tarnish his legacy at all? What would the talk be if he jumped on the biggest bandwagon there is in the NBA? And again, maybe that's not the Warriors right now, but I still think when they're healthy, Larry, I still think the Warriors are that team. I mean, look at how well they were playing earlier in the year when people are like, oh, gee, the Warriors are back. They're going to be, the champions again this year. And they still may be. Is that you think what he wants? He wants to just join a really good team and just win another ring or two and ride off into the sunset? I mean, if that's the case, why doesn't he go play in Milwaukee? If that's the case, go back to Miami. Miami's the number 1 seed in the East right now. They have a coaching staff that he's very familiar with, right? In Spoelstra, who's really good. They have a really good team. They play defense every night. It's not the same guy. They have young players that are good. I mean, if he really wants to do that, go back and play in Miami where you're already welcomed, where you know this situation, you know the system, you know the coaching staff. Why not do that?
Yeah. Well, I would love to see it. Jimmy Butler and LeBron butting heads on a nightly basis. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be incredible. Yeah, and it's funny. Like Mitch Richmond has a ring, right?
Yeah.
But he has it with the Lakers,
Right.
And I wonder what that ring means to him.
I don't think it means a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he had won with Sacramento, it would have meant more.
Sure.
If he'd won with Golden State, it would have meant more. Let's hit on a couple NBA topics outside of this. MVP finalists came out today. It's Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. Who do you got?
I would go with Giannis. I think Jokic is going to win, and that's no disrespect to Embiid. I know its coin only has 2 sides, but if it had 3 sides, you could flip a coin. I think they're all pretty much right in line with one another, but I would give it to Giannis. Who are you giving it to?
I'm giving it to Embiid. I think
Okay.
Embiid's been incredible this year. Jokic has elevated Denver for sure without, considering what he has played the whole year without Murray. But I just think Embiid has found a different level this year. I've
Yeah.
watched him a half dozen times, from start to finish, and thought, wow, this guy's
He's unbelievable.
absolutely on a different level from where he's been in the past. So I'd probably give it to Joel.
Does the fact that Denver is a 6th seed eliminate Nikola Jokic as an MVP? It doesn't for me. Okay,
Not for me either.
Not for me, because of you just mentioned without Murray, without Porter. If you told me that Jokic gets the MVP this year, I would be fine. If you tell me that Embiid is going to get it, I'm like, hey, he deserves it. If you tell me, I don't see a separation, Larry, between these 3 that we're talking about, and I think the voting is going to be unbelievably interesting.
Yeah. The other wild card factor in Warriors Denver that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because to me it didn't seem like he did a whole lot in game 1, and his career is like kind of, I don't even know what to make of his career, and that's the kid from Archbishop Midi, Aaron Gordon.
Yeah.
Who's a tremendous talent, went to Arizona. He's a high flyer, had that incredible dunk contest back to back with Levine, but he's making a grip of cash.
Yep.
He's on a team that doesn't have Jamal Murray. There's plenty of room for Aaron Gordon to take over and become a bigger part of this offense. And he just he's up and down the floor. He does some nice things, but he doesn't seem like he ever really takes hold.
Yep.
To me, I'm surprised. I had Aaron Gordon as the wild card factor, but he just doesn't look up to it.
I have always looked at Gordon and never really understood which Aaron Gordon you were going to get from night to night. That's number one. And again, I didn't see him a lot when he was playing in the East, but there were times when he would take your breath away and you're like, oh my God, this guy is going to be one of the best players in the league. Larry, we say motor. Does he have the motor? Does he have that inner drive? Does he have that which separates good players from very good players to great players? I watch Gordon play sometimes, and I'm almost like, he's almost like going through the motions. Like, I don't see that motor in him, that what you need to get to that next level. You just mentioned his talent, his skill set. It seems like he's got most of the tools in the toolbox, right? But for some reason, I'm with you. We're still waiting for him to ascend to that level, because talent-wise, you look at him, you're like, oh my God, this guy's got everything. But for whatever reason, it's not there on a consistent basis. Or at least when I watch him play, I don't see it on a consistent basis. I really don't.
3 last things before we let you go. And we really appreciate you doing this. And it's always awesome to talk sports with you. I'm really looking forward to doing this on the regular.
Me too.
Andrew Wiggins, another guy. He's an all-star this year. He had a terrible second half. Now Poole's coming of age. How do you look at Wiggins' future with Golden State? Because I don't see any way they can have Draymond, Clay, Steph. Poole looks like he's headed towards a max deal.
Yep.
Does that just guarantee that they're going to trade Wiggins? What's Wiggins' future?
First of all, I want to back up. When Wiggins was with Minnesota, the prevailing thought around the league was, do not trade for this guy. Okay. And Minnesota was very happy to move him. And you always talk about a player being in the right situation with the right fit. I mean, is there a better example of that than Andrew Wiggins and what he's done with the Warriors than what was going on in Minnesota? I mean, I used to go to Minnesota twice a year and talk to their announcers and talk to other people. And that the things that you would hear about Andrew Wiggins were not good. And it would almost shy you away, where you were like, God, I would love to have him on my team, or the team that you're working for, or your favorite team. But then when you hear the stories, like, oh no, I don't want him. So first and foremost, the right fit, being in the right situation, has been really good for him. But then you go back to what you just said. How are you going to keep everybody? How are you going to pay everybody? Which goes back to something you just brought up 5 minutes ago about LeBron. Right? I mean, would the Lakers do a package with Wiggins involved, with whatever else? I mean,
it would have to be Wiggins.
That's right. It would have to be. The nice thing about what Golden State has right now, they have a surplus of assets. I mean, they do. They just do. You look at their roster and you're like, I mean, you talked about the young players that didn't even play in game one. They're in a really good situation to do what they have to. But at some point, you make a good point. When you write those checks, are you going to be a luxury tax team? Is you going to go over the tax? I mean, so I know I'm kind of going around and about, but I could see Wiggins not being with the team next year. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is incredible since he just made the All-Star team.
That's right.
Somebody asked me, it was funny, I got a bunch of comments after you were last on, and somebody asked me, is Grant a Kings fan? And I thought, well, Grant's never really been a fan. But you know what? You spend so much time in a market watching a team. I don't know how you can't be kind of at least an enthusiast.
Yeah.
After you've departed the franchise, what was this year like? Did you still watch Kings games?
No.
Did you root for them? Do you take any special interest in Sacramento and their franchise because of all the years you spent there?
That's a fabulous question. First and foremost, I don't know any team announcer in the NHL, MLB, NBA, NFL, and I know a lot of them just like you do. I don't know of any team announcer that would tell you they're not a fan of the team that they watch play every night. You get wrapped up in there. You know all the players. You know their family members. Oh, by the way, you are getting paid by that franchise. So you ultimately want to see them have success because it will ultimately benefit you. But yes, of course, I was a big fan of Sacramento. I did their games for 32 years. 32 years. By the way, when Ralph Lawler retired, Larry, I'm pretty convinced that I have the most losses of any NBA announcer in the league. But now, no, I don't root for them. I mean, I don't necessarily root for them to lose because I still have a lot of friends that work in the organization. My son works there. I'm friends with some of the coaches. I don't root for them to win, but I don't necessarily root for them to lose every night. I don't watch the Kings play. I can't. It's too difficult. I get all of my information from the internet. I get my information from talking with people close to the team. I have not watched the Kings play once since I left there in June of 2020. I haven't watched one possession of one game, but I can tell you everything that's going on with their team. I talk with, again, a multitude of people every week. I I look at comments. I read stories on the internet, but I can't watch them. I just can't.
Yeah, that's very human, and it's understandable. Is there a coach or anything that you see on their horizon that you would say, you know what, that would be a great thing for that team? Or is it beyond any
Yeah,
coach?
there would be a
Beyond
great
any
thing.
individual pickup? Is there
Yeah, it would be great.
is there anything about their situation that's doomed,
Yes.
or are they literally a coach or player or trade away from turning the thing around? Is it personnel based, or is it a bad leadership from the top, and they need a new regime?
What they need more than anything is Vivek Ranadive to sell the team. That's what they need. If they really want to get out of the doldrum and get the respect from others around the league, this is a very small league, just like in baseball. I mean, it's a fraternity, and word gets out. And the word is you don't want to go to Sacramento. And coaching is not the problem. I mean, all you have to do is look at the number of coaches. They had Michael Malone, and they fired him for crying out loud.
Eric Musselman.
I mean, I can go on and on. Coaching is not the problem in Sacramento. Okay. Now, obviously, it's a talent-based league, and there aren't a lot of coaches that could come in with the talent that the Kings have or lack thereof, and all of a sudden turn them into a playoff team. But Larry, think about this, and this is not all on Vivek Ranadive because he wasn't there in 2006. The Kings have not made the playoffs since 2006. The Kings have not won 50% of their games since 2006. They have had 16 straight losing seasons. Now, digest that for a minute. 16 consecutive losing seasons. But Vivek has done a terrible job in running the team. He's done a terrible job with his front office and coaching hires. He's done a terrible job in terms of having a good working environment. There was a story in the Sacramento Bee a week ago yesterday, and it labeled the Kings as a toxic work environment from a former front office executive that was quoted in the story. All right. and said that the environment in Sacramento, it is a toxic work environment. And I would agree with that. It is toxic. And I don't care whether you're running a newspaper business, a car business, an insurance business, a radio business. I don't care. If you have a toxic work environment, you're not going to have success. And in my opinion, that story that was in the Sacramento Bee a week ago yesterday is spot on. There needs to be some big time changes. And in my opinion, it must start at the top in order for this team to get out of the doldrums. And I will tell you that most of the members of the media in Sacramento would back me up on this. The vast majority of fans would love to see an ownership change, but I don't see that happening based on what I'm hearing. I don't see Vivek selling his managing general partner shares and handing the keys to the car to somebody else, unfortunately.
Does it bother you that he lives in Atherton and the team's in Sacramento, or is that
Yes.
Is that a big deal? Because I mean, like
It is a
Hasso
big deal.
Plattner owns the Sharks. I don't even think he's been to a game.
Right.
He lives on a different continent.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal. You went to Sac State. You know the community. Sacramento, and it took me a long time to learn this. I grew up in New York on Long Island. I went to college in Ohio. I worked in Illinois for 3 years. And I got out to Sacramento, and it's a small community, Larry, as you know. And I thought I knew, but I didn't know. And it took me 7, 8, 9, 10 years, Larry, before I fully understood how the community and the town worked, about the founding fathers and all of the lineage leading up to now having a really good understanding of the community. And Vivek does not understand the Sacramento people. He doesn't understand how the community works. He thinks he does, but he doesn't. And when you don't make your home there and you commute almost every game to and from the community, there's only so much you can learn and know about the community. That was a problem as well with the Maloofs, although in all fairness to the Maloofs, they bought a house a mile from the arena and spent a lot of time in Sacramento. They made a conscious effort to be in Sacramento a lot, and they were. The owner before that, Jim Thomas, same thing. He didn't live in Sacramento, never spent time in Sacramento, commuted up for every game from Los Angeles. I do think that's important, especially in a community like Sacramento. And I hope that whoever is the next owner, whomever that is, I really hope they make Sacramento their home and commit to the community, because I'm a big believer in that. I never used to be, Larry. I was like, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. It does make a difference.
And if you read the chat boards and you read the fans, it matters to them. It matters to them.
It does
Let's finish
matter.
with a little football, because I know you and I could talk football for days as well. You're a New York Giant fan. I don't know if people know this, but Grant flies back to Jersey to see the games at MetLife. Let's talk a little bit about the Niners. There's the Jimmy Garoppolo thing swirling. He's even get traded on draft day. Will he get traded for Sam Darnold? Will he wind up in Carolina? Is there anybody else out there that has interest? Does Pittsburgh have interest despite Trubisky? Do your G-men have any interest despite the fact that they've got Daniel Jones? I mean, what do you make of Garoppolo, and what do you make of Deebo Samuel? It looks like Deebo.
Yep.
They're using him as a running back wide receiver, so that's going to shorten his shelf life. There's examples where receivers have been paid $70 million guaranteed as part of their deals. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. And yet I went and did a little research on the Niners and the contracts that Parag Marathe has negotiated, and they've never come close to giving out that level of a guarantee, and I don't see them doing it for a running back that they're using on 4th and 1 through the A gaps. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I got to think Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, who's under a lot of pressure. It's year 3 for Douglas with the Jets. He's talking big, like we need to do whatever. They tried to get Tyreek Hill. They struck out. The way I look at this, I think Joe Douglas has got 4 picks in the top 38. I think he's going to trade some combination of those draft picks to the Niners for Deebo Samuel on draft day.
Okay.
That's what I see coming. Give me your thoughts on the Niners. They got 2 huge stories that they're trying to cope with, and the fans are pulling their hair out.
All right, so let's talk with Samuel first. Assuming that you're right about the Jets wanting Samuel and giving draft picks, that looks great on paper, but it only looks great if you draft the right player. See, when I look at Samuel, you can say whatever you want. He was as valuable as any member of the 49ers, particularly after they lost that home game to Arizona, where they were dreadful when Murray didn't play. And that looked like the Niners were going to be down and out. They weren't going to recover. From that point forward, the Niners were a completely different team. And Samuel was as good as any player on that roster. So if you lose Samuel, Larry, my question is, how are you going to make up for what he did for that team and all the big plays that he made? You're now going to hope that you draft somebody in the first round, a young, quote unquote, stud receiver. What happens if you miss? I mean, there are a lot of mistakes that are made in the draft all the time. So I already know what the Niners have in Samuel, and what they have is a guy that works in Shanahan's offense, a guy that was instrumental in them making it to the NFC Championship game. And now you are going to, under your scenario, and I understand we're talking about a hard cap and $70 million, I get where you're coming from. Now you're going to say, okay, what are the 49ers going to be like without Deebo Samuel and without Jimmy Garoppolo? Because I think we can safely say Garoppolo is not going to be the starter in week one. Here's the thing that I don't understand. And Larry, I disagree with you on some of the things as it relates to Trey Lance. You're hoping and praying that Trey Lance is going to be a really good quarterback. Again, you look at his throw, the way he throws the football, you look at a lot of other things, he looks like he's got the tools. Say what you want about Garoppolo, but I already know what the Niners had in Garoppolo. I know a guy that took him to the Super Bowl and a guy that was the quarterback that just was in the NFC Championship game. And had it not been for a dropped interception in the breadbasket, the Niners probably beat the Rams and go to the Super Bowl, but they didn't. Is Garoppolo great? No. His level of success with that team, Larry, is undeniable. Are you certain, Larry, as a guy that scouts and knows scouting very well because of what you've done in your career, that Trey Lance is a no ifs, ands, or buts about it going to be a good to very good to great quarterback in the NFL? I don't know that. What are we judging that on? Small college, inactivity for almost 2 full years, very few snaps last year. Yeah, he got reps in practice sometimes. He was hurt. With that style that they want him to play in as well, Larry, do you see Trey Lance, number one, being that guy? How confident are you in that? And number two, staying healthy? And then third, how long is it going to take him to be that guy where the 49ers do not take a significant step back while Lance is learning how to be a quote-unquote starting quarterback in the NFL? Those are the things that I question when I look at the Niners this year.
Well, I think that's all fair. It's all, it's a fair criticism. He's an FCS quarterback. And you don't know. And he didn't play very much. But I like what he is as far as physically, mentally, and that this guy's committed to the process of football, Monday through Saturday, not just Sundays. So I think he's a great prospect, but you're right. We don't know what he's going to be, but ultimately they've already made that decision. They made that decision when they invested all those picks in the trade. Now they got to go with him. Now they have to go with him. And I think he's going to be fine. I really do. I think now Garoppolo, is he going to make no mistakes? No, he's going to make mistakes. But I think overall his skill set, Garoppolo, the book is out on Garoppolo. And you can almost see defensive coordinators talking to their teams. Don't worry about defending outside the numbers. Don't worry about the deep third of the field. If you're going to cheat one way late in the down, cheat in the middle of the field. Why? Because he's going to throw it in the middle of the field. So I think the book's kind of out on him. I think everybody kind of knows his weaknesses. I would disagree with he carried them to a Super Bowl. They ran the ball, like 75% of the time.
Right. He didn't carry them to a Super Bowl. No, I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think he carried them to a Super Bowl.
He's a solid NFL quarterback. I don't think if you said, where does he rank? I would say 12 to 15. That's where I would rank him. And Trey's very much a projection. So I like what I see with Trey. I know they have to go with Trey. I don't know what it's going to look like. And you're right. It may take 2 years, Grant. I mean, it's unrealistic to think that a quarterback in his first year is going to step in and lead a team to the Super Bowl. But then the question is, what's the smart play with Deebo? Is it smart to give a receiver $70 million guaranteed that you're using like a running back when running backs, there's a whole lot of teams in the NFL that don't want to give that second contract to a running back. I think the Niners ought to take the picks if they can get If they can get 3 out of those 4 picks from the Jets, which is a big question.
Yeah,
But
sure.
if they can get 3 out of those 4 picks, I'm taking those picks. And you're right, he has to be replaced, but you might have to replace him with a running back and a receiver because you have Ayuk, you have Kittle. You could probably find another receiver, but you're not. What you really miss is what you talked about when after the Arizona game, they started handing it to Debo, and then he gave them a dynamic runner threat that they don't have without him. So if they can get Kenneth Walker the third or somebody like that in the draft out of Michigan State, maybe you can replace him with a running back than trying and a receiver. I mean, you're probably gonna have to replace him with numbers anyway. I don't know. It's a tough call because they did this with DeForest Buckner. They got out from underneath Buckner. They went to Kinlaw. They replaced him, position wise, but they never replaced that interior rusher that commands a double team, and their defensive front has not been the same without Buckner. So it's a projection and it's a risk.
Well, and you're right about Garoppolo. The Niners have already made their decision. They made their decision leading up to the draft last year. They made their decision. And so you're right. You have to give the keys to the car to Lance, but that doesn't mean it's going to work and the car is going to drive perfectly down the road. I think there are going to be some big time bumps, particularly in the first several weeks, just based on his lack of experience. And then, so I'm looking at the 49ers right now, and I'm thinking about, okay, in the months of December in the playoffs, a football team that's not going to have Garoppolo a quarterback, and under your scenario, which you might very well be right, not have Samuel. And we're now looking at that division. Will the Rams have a Super Bowl hangover? And who the hell knows what's going on with Arizona with Kyler Murray? Can you figure that out? I mean, they were 9-2, and Murray was talked about as the MVP of the league. And then Hopkins gets hurt, and they just went right down the toilet. Seattle now without Wilson, obviously, that's not going to be a factor. So I'm trying to figure out where the 49ers fit in here with a quarterback that, yes, has a lot of upside. We know that. But that's all it is right now. It's upside. We don't know. We don't have a body of work on him. And now if you have Samuel not in that lineup as well, I'll tell you the one thing, it is going to be a lot of question marks and a lot of unknowns going into this season instead of a sure thing. Say what you want about Garoppolo, and again, I know this is not sexy he won, okay? And the bottom line is you win. And I'm with you in that year that they went to the Super Bowl, the Niners had the best defense in football. And in the fourth quarter, he missed Kittle on a couple of wide open throws that probably would have cemented the game. I'm with you on that. But the results are the results, all right? They're pretty damn good. Now you don't have him, and now you don't have Samuel under your scenario, which could very well play out. A lot of unknowns, Larry, going into this training camp, going into the season. That's the way I look at the 49ers.
Yeah, it's a vital draft next weekend. Now, you're a Giants fan. We'll finish with the Giants. How come the Giants are not interested in Garoppolo? Why do you not see that as a fit there? And there was rumor about maybe a month ago that that the Giants may be willing to move Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
And that the 49ers may have some interest in Barkley as
I'll drive him to the airport
and replace Raheem Mostert.
Yep.
Where are you with Daniel Jones? Where are you with Saquon Barkley? Where are you with your G-men? And why are they not interested in Garoppolo?
Daniel Jones has, in his career, played behind arguably the worst offensive line in football every year. So I don't know whether Daniel Jones can play or not based on that. They have their draft pick of a first round of 2 years ago in Thomas that came on. They feel that number 5 and number 7, they're going to get at least one of the top tackles in the draft, and they'll finally have some stability on their offensive line where they can fully evaluate Jones. Do I think Garoppolo is better than Jones? Would I take him right now as a Giants fan? Yes, I would. But the Giants seem committed with their new general manager, with the new head coach. When I mean committed, I don't mean long-term, but at least for this year. As far as Barkley, I thought it was a bad pick then. It's a bad pick now. I would never take a running back second overall in the draft, the way the NFL game is played now. Barkley behind a bad offensive line. Obviously, the knee injury is something you can't forecast, but he has not met his expectations. But I'll tell you, if you put Saquon Barkley on a good team with a good offensive line, I think he would be really, really good. Unfortunately for him, he's been behind, again, arguably the worst offensive line in football for his young career. So the Giants are still a couple of years away. They need offensive line and they need an edge rusher, which they haven't had in a while. They play in a weak division, Larry. They play in a
Yeah.
weak division. Washington, Philadelphia's okay, but they're not great. Dallas, who the hell knows what you're getting with Dallas year in, year out. I thought Prescott took a big step back. That offensive line, which for years was the best in football, is now, again, you talk about Elliott, the money that he gets. Is he a special back anymore in the NFL? Sure doesn't look like it, right? I mean, Elliott, what's he done in the last 2 years? So that division is up for grabs, but I don't see the Giants as being one of those teams that can grab it. I really don't.
It is interesting that, to me, the New York market's so interesting. The fans are so impatient when it comes to the Knicks or it comes to the Yankees and the Mets. But when it comes to the Giants, for some reason, there's this unbelievable amount of patience that they've been bad for a while. Daniel Jones is a turnover machine, and yet he's big, got great stature, he's fast.
Yep.
I mean, he can run for 100 yards.
Yep.
He looks good. He is like central casting for a quarterback, but man, then the game starts and he turns it over and he just shows no remorse for any of these turnovers. It's just like mass turnovers every single Sunday.
I think that fans the last few years in particular have lost patience. You see a lot of no-shows on Sundays. So that has changed. I think also when you look at their recent body of work, if we go back, 10 years, a Super Bowl, and then they won another one 3 years before that, which kind of bought some time. But the situation has been awful since their last Super Bowl when they beat New England at that game in Indianapolis. From that point forward, they've been terrible. The patience is really declining. And again, all you got to do is turn the TV on in November and December and see all of the no-shows at the game. So they're running out of time. Again, new general manager, new coach. But is Daniel Jones the guy? Larry, if this was a top quarterback draft, right? If this were a top quarterback draft, I could have seen the Giants moving up to get that quote-unquote quarterback. They passed on a lot of good quarterbacks in the last few drafts because they believed in Jones. And I'm with you. Turns the ball over too much. Fumbles a lot, Larry. That's the thing I don't understand. He fumbles the ball a lot, which is very alarming. He's been getting hurt because he runs. So I'm not sold on him, to say the least. But again, in all fairness, Larry, the offensive line for the Giants has been absolutely pathetic throughout his career. Awful. Terrible.
I love wrapping sports with you. I won't bore you with the chat, but we do have one good one in the chat. How often do you talk to the great Jerry Reynolds? I know you and Jerry were a great tandem for a long time. Jerry was the GM of the Kings. He was the coach of the Kings. He's had, him and Gary Gerald and some of these guys are like so associated with the Kings. You obviously were for years and years. Do you talk to anybody up in Sacramento? You talk to Jerry often?
I talk to Jerry once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, but no more than 2 weeks. I've talked to Jerry on a regular basis since I left in June of 2020. And matter of fact, I'll be calling him this afternoon to check in with him. But I talk to him all the time. He's doing great. He's in good health. He's happy, and thanks for reaching out and asking that question. But I talk to Jerry quite a bit, and every time I talk to Jerry, he makes me laugh. Even if I'm in a down mood, Jerry makes me laugh. There's only one Jerry Reynolds. The guy's the best, Larry. He is the best. Yeah.
You're the best, man. You're the best. Hey, keep it rolling. Great. Best of luck with the podcast. It sounds like it's awesome. We'll schedule a time. I'd love to come on and wrap football or basketball or whatever, baseball, whatever you want to talk about.
Love it.
And thanks for stopping by the Krueg Show. We really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure, Larry. Anytime, man. Anytime.